The Google Display Network gives AdWords advertisers the ability to easily scale the reach of their campaigns to an impressive inventory of over 1 million websites around the globe. But this is a two-way street. With that much inventory in the network, if you don't know how to evaluate your performance on the display network, you could end up with some very high costs and very little return on your investment. We've come to expect measurability from search marketing. It's one of the reasons that search has become such a big advertising medium in the first place. So there's no reason not to expect the same measurability from our campaigns on the display network. One thing to know about measuring performance on the display network is that you shouldn't use your search campaign's performance as a comparison. And this is because the display network is a completely different animal. When you run a traditional search campaign on Google, you're advertising to people who are actively seeking out your products and services. For example, if we're selling olive oil, on the search network we can make sure that our ads will only be shown to people who are actively doing searches on olive oil. On the display network, that's not the case. Here, your ads are displayed to users based on the websites that they visit, not the keywords that they type in. In the example of olive oil, when it comes to the display network, your ads could be shown to people who are reading reviews or browsing your competitors' websites, or looking for recipes or any number of other things. They don't have to be actively looking for olive oil. The only requirement is that the user is browsing olive oil-related content. Now, the first thing we need to do is understand what our underlying business objectives are before we evaluate a campaign's performance. If you have pure branding or positioning goals, and you're using the display network as part of a larger brand awareness campaign, for example, you would certainly want to use traditional measures of success. Things like before and after research on aided and unaided brand recall, or brand recognition and association studies. We might also use metrics like raw impressions or the number and types of websites that have shown our ads to help establish whether or not our campaigns were successful. But if we have direct response goals, meaning we're looking for people to click on our ads, go to our websites, and convert on our goals, then we'll have to treat the display network a little differently. Because of the fundamental difference between display and search advertising, we can't expect to see similar performance when it comes to metrics like click-through rate, which is just the number of clicks you get divided by the number of times your ad is shown. Every campaign and every advertiser is different, and there's really no such thing as a good quote-unquote click-through rate. But I can tell you that it's not at all uncommon to see search network click-through rates that are 10 times higher than display network click-through rates. And it's also often the case that both of these would be considered successful. And this makes sense. When users are passively browsing content, it's easy to accrue a lot of impressions without getting nearly as many clicks. Still, we can use click-through rate to see which versions of our creatives resonate best with our audience by running ad split tests, which we cover in a different video. So in addition to click-through rate, what else can we use? Well, as always, it's best to use conversion data to determine whether or not a given campaign is putting money in your pocket profitably. Using metrics like conversion rate and cost per conversion, you can calculate your ROI in the same way you would a search network campaign. And remember, while it's virtually unheard of to have a click-through rate in a display campaign that's as high as a traditional search campaign, that doesn't mean that you can't get your cost per conversion right where you need it for your display advertising. One more metric that can be helpful, especially with the display network, is the view-through conversion. What this means is that a conversion occurred within 30 days of someone having seen your ad, but they did not click on that ad. You can think of this as kind of like an assist in the basketball world. If the three-point shot is the conversion, the view-through conversion is the one that passed the shooter the ball. There are certainly arguments out there as to how true this is, especially since it's very possible that someone loaded a page with your ad on it and never even looked at your ad. But no matter what side of the fence you sit on, I'd argue that it's better to have the data and choose how you want to use it rather than not have it at all. When we evaluate our performance on the display network, we have to remember that it's a very different type of advertising than our search networks provide. Because of that, we can't necessarily use the same metrics we might use to evaluate search performance. But by focusing on our business objectives and the appropriate metrics, we'll be able to determine whether or not display network campaigns are accomplishing our goals.